am truly excited about our next guest because we are going to be talking about a topic that is very dear to me, Zurich. Don't we love Zurich? Don't we love the life that we have here? Zurich is a very innovative hub. A lot of startups, a lot of tech companies have emerged from Zurich. And is it fair to say that there is a Zurich scene in the same way that there's a Berlin scene or a San Francisco scene? Our keynote speaker this morning mentioned moving back from San Francisco to Zurich. That was great to hear that. Something is happening here in Zurich, or is it? Our guest is Urs Bucher. Welcome, Urs.
Hi, Ben.
Very nice to have you in the studio. So for the people who do not know you, I think it'd be very interesting for them to know and learn who you are. So can you quickly introduce yourself and how you are in such a good position to be talking about past, present, and future of a potential Zurich tech scene?
Sure. Right. So as most people who are part of the Zurich tech scene, I wasn't born here. I was born and raised like 50 kilometers out of here in Aargau.
A foreign country.
Yeah, you always have to show the passport now. Then I moved to, fast forward, I moved to Zurich, to up the lake like in 1990 something, and moved into the city at 2003.
Okay.
I started, let's move on to tech. I started coding in approximately 1983 when we had, punch cards and magnetic tapes and stuff. And again, fast forward. So
you're one of the original coders.
Yeah, COBOL was the language that was cool then. Okay. I hear some banks are now looking again for COBOL coders. I don't have the manuals anymore, so no chance.
Excuse me, but I'm sorry, can I stop you here?
Yeah.
Why are some banks looking for COBOL coders?
That's called legacy applications and mainframe computers that somewhere buried deep down at Uetlihof or at the UBS data centers, there still is COBOL code.
This legacy code and technology. Wow.
Sorry I interrupted you. No worries. So fast forward to 93, I started here at Microsoft at the local office building up their partner network here in Switzerland. For the partners who developed software on top of the Microsoft stack. I've done that for 7 years, and in 98, I started to work with the very early internet agencies that were already around here, like the predecessors of Namix or Unique and all the likes, that some of them still are around. And then in 2000, I started the Zurich office for Namix and started to build up their sales and marketing efforts the way they should be. And at approximately the same time, a couple of guys and I had the idea to develop an industry award for the Swiss internet scene called Best of Swiss Web.
Okay.
So I've been part of that gang for another 6, 7, 8 years. And that's actually the combination of early days at Microsoft, Namix time, Best of Swiss Web. That's how I got to become part of the tech scene. And a couple of years later, I think in 2010, a friend of mine shouted across Cambridge when we were passing by each other. He shouted across the traffic that he needs me for something, and I shouted back, okay, I'm in. And that's
the way we do it in tech in Zurich.
That's actually how Tedx Zrich started. That's
really?
The guy was Peter Hogenkamp. He held the license back then. And a couple of weeks later, we had the first meeting, and in fall of 2010, we ran the first Tedx Zurich here at the old ZHDK. And I'm still part of that team, and that adds another bit of network to the tech scene, of course.
Yeah.
So that's me. Oh. And another thing, of course, that's all the modern, new, fast-moving things. At the other end of the spectrum, I'm part of a guild here in Zurich. Those strange guys that walk around at 16 Leuten wearing strange clothes. So that's also part of the Zurich scene, but not that
modern. How do you get invited into a guild?
It's actually not that difficult, depending on the guild. The usual limiting factor is the size of the guild restaurant you have. So here in Wiedikon, where I am, the room fits 126 people. So that's how many people how many members we actually can have.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, the guild, the age pyramid is pretty at the end of the life cycle of the people. So every now and then you get you get new spaces, and you can apply. It's as easy as that.
Wow! So already the first great insight about getting into Zurich guilds. I think us expats, we've heard about them. They seem very mysterious to us.
Yeah, well, there's two very old ones, and then there's the ones from the areas like Wiedikon, Schwammerdingen, whatever. But actually, it's just people who want to contribute to the better of the area. Yeah. That's all.
Okay, so I think you've established quite well why you are very well connected within the Zurich scene, if we can call it a scene. That's what we're going to discuss. Between your best of Swiss web, between Tedx and your guild, you have a very extensive network here in Zurich. So now let's discuss Zurich 20 years ago. We were talking about the aftermath of a financial crisis. By the way, you mentioned going back as early as the 90s. So you've lived through the 2000 crash.
Definitely. I remember quite well when I started in 2000 at Namix, we had high flying plans, and then the dot-com crash happened.
Yeah.
And there's something like plans and there's life. They don't always match. And in 2008, the financial crisis again.
Yeah.
But
which was not in itself a tech crisis, but had a huge impact.
But it was like a domino effect from all the financial institutions. Then they cut budgets and stopped companies working for them.
Yeah.
But your original question was whether there was already a scene in 2000, an IT scene. There definitely was one in Zurich.
Yeah.
Because the ecosystem was already there before. We already had the universities. There was money around, and I already mentioned banks before. Banks needed software, they needed skills, they needed people. And that's how companies like Netcetera, TIM, Ad Novum, all the guys who have been around there, Ergon, or Avaloq, now we're talking again COBOL code, have actually found their existence and have grown throughout the years. So there definitely has been a scene before. It wasn't about being online, but it was about coding
software,
real stuff. Yeah.
The real stuff that's actually useful.
Yeah, well, no. Let's not go there.
So there were some elements of an ecosystem. There were universities and there were banks in dire needs for system.
Yeah.
But how do you actually explain the scene? Because if you ask any foreigner about their stereotype about Switzerland, they have in mind a country that moves slowly, that is big companies are very well established, that don't move really fast. One of the jokes about Switzerland is that the only thing that they've invented is the cuckoo clock, which I believe is completely wrong, and definitely not what we are supporting in this program. But you know what I mean. There's stereotypes from outside.
There are those super tankers that really move slow, and they still move slow.
Yeah.
Talking about banks again. But there are the speedboats that surround them and do new things, and that's already been there in the 2000s.
So the speedboats have always been there?
Yeah, I'm persuaded that they have been there. And I mean, one example that is a bit closer to this place here is at Namix we had the idea to develop a thing called local.ch. And that was a spin-off that one of our guys started, and he single-handedly created that thing that is still around today. TIA Media was at some point in time, I think, was a co-owner. Now you're not anymore, or TX Media is not anymore, but that's the kind of speedboats that's surrounded and sped up ahead of the super tankers.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens these days. If you look at the banks, in Switzerland. They're not moving fast because they can't. They're too big. But there's
they're still looking for those program coders.
They're still looking for the COBOL coders, yeah. But there's companies like Yapeal. I think you had Neon here today.
Yes.
There's companies like Apiox. There's Evolute. There's Sonic. All those startups that are active in the fintech area.
Yes.
And they move bloody fast. And they get cred not just here in Switzerland, but also across Europe and the US. That's what you see, what happens when they do a financial round, when they need venture capital. Usually they don't, after family friend series A, whatever, convertible loans, they start to look outside of Switzerland for money, and usually they're successful.
So in preparation for this interview, you've actually argued that, contrary to stereotypes, Switzerland is actually one of the most innovative countries.
That's not me saying this. That's actually the World Intellectual Property Organization, who has released its 2021 Global Innovation Index. And they say Switzerland topped the rankings with a score of 65.5 out of 100. And it's the 11th time, actually, that this happened in the last 11 years.
That's amazing.
So, it's not just me.
It's a lot of people.
Yes.
With authority. So you mentioned the universities earlier. You mentioned, and I guess you're talking about ETH.
ETH, EPFL, University of Zurich.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a bit of stats that they publish every year, and ETH alone has 25 successful startups spin-offs every year. And out of those 25, 90 are still around after 5 years.
What do you call successful? Do you mean a startup that's been able to raise capital, or actually
still exists after 5 years? Let's leave it with that. If they don't find capital, they don't survive for 5 years. It's as easy as that.
Yeah. So enough capital to survive 5 years.
Yeah, and grow. Absolutely.
And business models, I guess. What can you tell us some of the stories of early spin-offs and startups coming up of that university ecosystem? Do you remember some of them?
Yeah, well, I mean, there have been successful and not so successful examples. One that is, again, close to here is what Doodle Mike did, Mike Neff.
Yeah.
He created Doodle, sold it to somebody here. That's a very nice example. And then if you look rather later examples, what's happening in the drone space, what the people around Scaramuza do at ETH. They've been spun out a while ago, or the people at Photokite who developed a drone that helps first aid rescuers to evaluate the scene. Those are the things that really are highly successful. And of course, there have been, as always with startups, there have been startups that were not as successful as they should have been, and they disappeared again.
Yeah.
Back in the late 90s and also now. But that's startup life.
One of the factors that made a big difference is, at some point, venture capitalists.
Yes, absolutely.
Decided to enter the Zurich space, and that was quite a difference. When did that happen?
Well, it wasn't there in 2000 for sure.
Yeah.
It happened. I didn't do any research, but in my memory, it started to happen around 28, 9, 10, when the first glimpses of venture capitalists or funds that are willing to invest in early stage startup showed up. And today you have locally here, you have like Red Alpine, you've got the Übermorgen Ventures, you've got the Wingman guys, you've got the Hammer team, which is very interesting as a name. The CVVC, you got all these guys all these people who are very much interested to invest local here in early stage, with the hope, of course, to make a good hockey stick win.
Hockey stick. I know what you mean, but can you explain for
the viewers? If you invest, I don't know, $1 million, and you get out a multiple of 20, 30, 40, 50. On a stats, that looks like a hockey stick.
That looks like a hockey stick. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about some of the factors that might have created the scene and why we have it today. So now, is it fair to talk about a scene? What do you think defines this scene? What are the characteristics?
Well, in the first place, it's the people. It's the people who know each other. One of the beauties of Zurich and Switzerland, I think, is that it's small. And if you explain to somebody that in Switzerland everybody knows everybody, they don't believe you. Unless they walk with you down a road somewhere and every fifth person knows you and you know every fifth person.
I mean, maybe you know everybody.
No, it's not just me. I think it's if you lived around Zurich and you've been active in the tech or IT or startup scene, after a couple of years, it's just everybody knows everybody. And it's small enough that happens. So that's good. Then, as I said, the universities around, we have very good, high qualified people out of the universities. Unfortunately, not enough, but that's another story. We have now in Zurich, we had last year just released some stat here in my favorite newspaper. It's made in this house. Apparently, there were 64,000 expat working permits only in the city of Zurich for last year. So that adds to the manpower, to the human power here. And it's also the mood of the people. When back in 2000, if you had a startup idea, you failed, everybody was looking at you and saying, bah, you failed, you're out of the game. Today it's, okay, you failed, get up, try again, try again, try again. So that changed totally.
Yeah. Why do you think this change of mentality happened? That we all of a sudden it was okay for startups to fail?
I think it's got a lot to do with people who came from outside of Switzerland, who brought more of that mentality into Switzerland and into Zurich.
So maybe you're going to tell me if this is linked. You mentioned that there are not enough qualified people coming out of these universities. Anybody who works in tech in Zurich knows that there's a shortage of tech people. It's really hard to recruit tech people. That's what also makes it really attractive for foreigners to move here.
Yes, if they get a permit.
Do you think that this you mentioned there are a lot of foreign permits of people working in tech here. Is it linked to the lack of qualified people coming out of universities or available on the market?
It's just a bandwidth problem with the universities. They deliver the max of people in the Mint area that they can suck up and go through university. Okay. It starts very early. They need more seats. Yeah, they need more seats. We need more kids who are interested in IT, in Mint, in math, in whatever, in stats. And but in the end, it's a quantity problem. It's not a quality problem. But because there are only so few Swiss people that we can take into the industry, we need foreigners and we need more permits. For fuck's sake, we need more permits.
By the way, this is your opportunity to ask questions to Urs. You can ask the question in the chat section of the stage. You can go to chat or Q&A, and I'll be looking at what you guys are typing. It's a very good opportunity that we have to be talking to you. One thing I haven't talked about yet, we talked about the universities, the venture capitalists, the speedboats, and now in Zurich we have huge tech companies that have set up headquarters.
We've got the elephants in the room. That's true.
Let's talk about the elephants in the room.
I mean, that's in IT and in tech. Pretty much everybody knows that we've got the elephants here. We've always had IBM up in Rüschlikon with their research lab. Yeah. Something that people tend to forget totally. Yeah. And then since the early 2000s, employee number 8 of Google, the guy that shares the same first name as I do, but the last name is different, Urs Hölzle, who went to ETH, by the way, had the idea to open up a Google office at Limmatquai.
Was he Swiss, by the way?
He is Swiss.
I don't know why I said that. If you're watching us, sorry. So he's Swiss.
He's Swiss. He studied at ETH, and he was employed as employee number 8 at Google over in Mountain View. Yep. And then Google actually moved from that tiny office at Limmatquai to Hüllemann Areal with Zugel. And now they are in Hüllemann Areal, they are at Europa Allee, they have a roughly 4,500 people. And one of the most prominent signs of change for me actually is very physical. They announced that they will open a third hub right down the road here at Müllerstraße, where IBM Enterprise, the enterprise division the enterprise division of Swisscom was living and working for about, I think, 20 years. Now they're moving out.
That's very symbolic.
For me, that's absolutely symbolic. They're moving out, they're renovating the building now, and Google gets in with another, 1,000 people. But there's more. There's this not-so-hidden Facebook team in Zurich. Yeah. They upped their team now to, I think, 350. And there's Oracle developing things in Prime Tower, which nobody ever realizes. But there's some developers on the floor under me who do strange things with relational databases, I guess.
Amazon is recruiting lots.
Yeah, that's just what the next thing that I wanted to say. And then good stuff leads to more good stuff. Amazon bought another ETH spin-off called Vision. They develop 3D scanners, so your clothes fit really. And they bought them, I think, sometime last year. And they recently announced that they want to hire 150 people here in Zurich. And they want to do the integration of the Vision software and the further development of the software here in Zurich. And that again is a sign to me that Zurich as a hub is interesting, despite the high cost.
So is this a good thing because they're creating more shortage of
it's
of
a two-sided, two-sided sword actually. It's making good people even more expensive on one side. On the other side, knowing that there's like 4,500 people at Google at the Dev and Research Center, you can rest assured that not all of them will stay there for the rest of their lives. Because at some point in time, you've reached your glass ceiling, you don't want to deal with that anymore, you're interested in doing something in a smaller company. And when you got used to living in Zurich and the quality of life here, chances are that you will look around at the local scene.
Yes.
So it goes both ways.
It's hard to leave Zurich.
Yes, which is a good thing.
Because we love it here.
Yeah, totally.
So actually this is a great transition for what I want to ask you next, is why would a talent in tech move to Zurich or choose Zurich and the scene over San Francisco, over Berlin, which are in size are much bigger and maybe one can argue have more opportunities. What do you think?
Depending on which stage of life the person is, I think there are different flavor or different factors that influence that. One thing that is for sure is quality of life.
Yeah.
I've been around the world every now and then, and I always come back and like what I have and see here. And only if you've seen other places you can really like what you see here and you know what you've got. Quality of life, and then as a person who gets a salary, it's the level of the salary, of course. It's the security in Switzerland, and since you mentioned San Francisco. And looking at what happened to house prices or rent prices in the Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, this has gone absolutely nuts, and you don't want to deal with that anymore. You want to get out. Now,
but
Berlin.
I mean, don't you think that in Zurich rent prices as well have?
Yeah, but no, they did. They went up, of course, but they didn't skyrocket as insane as in San Francisco. Yeah.
Or
now,
Dublin, actually.
Yeah, but Berlin is a different story. Berlin has a totally different groove. And then it's a matter of taste, I think, and a matter also of who offers you a job where.
Okay.
So.
Yes, it's good to have choices. Sometimes you don't.
Yes. Yeah.
How is the groove different here from Berlin?
Stereotype. Here.
Please. That's what we do.
You're laughing again there in the back. Okay, stereotypes. In Zurich, everything's clean, tidy, and everything. Berlin is a bit different.
You have the most diplomatic way that I've ever heard to stereotype.
No, and on the other hand, in Berlin you have Spaties, where you can go and buy beer at 2 o'clock in the morning. In Zurich, that's still kind of difficult unless you are at Langstrasse.
There are ways.
Yeah, I know.
We're almost coming to the end of the hour. So I guess my last question for you.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future of the scene? Where is it going? I mean, we've seen, Zalando has announced another big, maybe not as big as the other elephants, but quite big.
I think that once they realize how nice it is here, that'll drag more of them around here, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The future, I think we're going to see more of a tech scene. I see a lot of positive things happening across the board on the mood side, on the money side, on startups that come out. If and when the economy continues to strive as it did in the last couple of years, I don't see the scene suffering or becoming bigger. I'd rather see it grow up as much as the city can digest it, definitely. And if the economy turns, if the pendulum swings back, then everything will change again anyway. And that's just a question of time, but that's not only a Zurich thing, that's just life.
Yeah, but I think one of the characteristics that you mentioned is that maybe the pendulum swings once in a while, but people here are very resilient.
That's true, yeah. We've seen that at the dot-com boom or the bust of the dot-com boom. Financial crisis, we've seen that. So I think, and we've seen glimpses of that also now in the last year and a half. There are very much varying opinions of how well we did, but if you look outside of Switzerland and compare peers with peers and apples with apples, I think we've done very, very well. So we can deal with crises, I think. So, and if there's the next crisis will come, whatever form, shape, or size. And so far, we've dealt with that quite well.
Very good perspectives to come. Thank you so much, Urs, for joining us.
You're welcome.
I've loved hearing about the history of the Zurich scene. Albeit, we could have talked here for days.
Oh yeah, well, I have a story or two, but I think that'll be for the beer afterwards.
Exactly, for the beer. I think I need one. I've been on air for 9 hours now. I'm ready to move on. So, guys, this was our last talk. What a way to cap the day with Urs Bucher. Thank you so much for coming. And now you have two options. It's 5 o'clock. You can go and watch the closing speech in the main stage Verdino, or you can go and watch the finale of the TX Go tournament. You choose. So both of them are available on Hopin. You can tune in the different stages, but I would like to thank you all for tuning in and following us on TX Conference TV today. I hope that you found these interviews very insightful. Thank you for coming to the TX Conference as well. I hope you've had a lot of inspiration and new ideas. Thank you so much, TX Group, for not only organizing this, but also having us, to Harry Fuchs, of course, and his team, and all the volunteers who made this streaming and this conference possible. Maybe our director can switch to the studio cam. I'd like to thank Creation Station for putting together this operation. I mean, look at what the studio looked like. It's an absolute big operations to put this stream together. So thank you, Creation Station. I've been Benjamin Delahaye for Comédie Suisse. This was the TX Conference TV. And now it's time to switch to the closing speech or the TX Go finale. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.